So good morning, everybody, and you're very welcome to this coffee chat. As we know, we have been talking about employee experience quite a lot. It is at the forefront of many companies' minds. And I'd love to welcome Angelica Reich this morning to talk to us a little bit about that topic and to explore a little bit about some of the things that are impacting companies today. So you're very welcome, Angelica. Great to have you here. I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself and your professional journey to date.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks, Fiona, for having me this morning. I'm a partner with McKinsey. Right now, I have been with our firm for over 13 years, but actually by background, I'm a psychologist, and I started my career in research. So I've been very passionate since the beginning of my studies about people, about talent, and over the past couple of years, especially also about the future of work and how new technologies and changes in our ways of working affect employees and employee engagement. And I serve a lot of clients, especially in that area. And I'm very excited about our chat this morning.
Super, super great to have you. And tell me, when you think about what you're working in day to day, what have been some of your observations in how companies across the world are optimizing employee engagement? That's really goes far behind, hybrid, in a world where hybrid becomes even more relevant today.
Yeah, so hybrid working has been the new normal, basically, since the beginning of the COVID pandemic. What we see is that 90% of companies have started to embrace hybrid working, and 4 in 5 employees want to keep it in the future. The interesting thing is, though, when studying employee engagement intensively as part of our Great Attraction research series, we found that there's many more factors that are critical for employee engagement, for retention, for keeping people productive and engaged at work. And what we found in particular is that there's 3 factors that are most critical for people, aside from hybrid working and flexibility. The first one is adequate compensation. By adequate, I mean compensation where people feel that it's adequate with regard to the value they contribute to a company. The second factor is the development and learning opportunities that people get. Now, it's the second most important factor when you ask people, why am I staying or leaving an employer? And the third factor that's critical is the leadership style. So are leaders inspiring? Are they caring? So with that in mind, it's really important for companies to optimize for all of those factors and to make sure you are designing an engaging employee experience. You offer the right hygiene factors, like pay, like flexibility, but also that you prepare your leaders to really be effective in a hybrid way of working, and that leaders can keep people engaged in a very different way of working than what they were used to when starting their leadership careers.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, we hear a lot about empathetic leadership, but, sometimes that can be even really hard in a world of hybrid where you're not seeing people face to face. You're not able to have some of those water cooler chats. And you really, I find in Microsoft, we've had to really make a conscious effort to try and connect people. Whether that's just casually on making sure there's more room for coffee chats, and also just helping teams to connect with each other. So I think technology has certainly been helping on that front to make sure people can be a little bit more connected, and have a bit more empathy, especially as we're going through some tougher times. So we've actually just released some new data that shows that employers who are continually trying to evaluate the workplace productivity and the employee engagement have better bottom line results. And I think we've seen a lot of evidence to show that. And I think, when we look at fostering open, agile feedback from employees, it's really important to make sure that there is that continual feedback loop. I'm just wondering, have you any guidance for leaders on how to best achieve that?
Yeah. So first of all, what you mentioned, right, that managing both performance, but also the people side of things leads to more financial success and more productivity, we see absolutely the same pattern. In fact, our McKinsey Global Institute has recently published a study of 1,800 companies where we found that those that manage both the people side and the performance side have higher return on investment, are more resilient, have higher employee satisfaction, and are even better at innovation. Yeah, so I absolutely agree that it's super critical to manage the people side of things with the same rigor and as data backed, as you would do the performance side. So the question how to best do it, personally, I'm a huge fan of people analytics. There is so much data available in organizations that give hints at employee engagement, at productivity, at what you can do better to optimize people and organizational health, how we call it. And what I love about people analytics is that it allows you not just to collect feedback from people, which is important, but it allows you to really identify patterns and causal relationships. So, for example, you can better understand the drivers, why people are behaving in a certain way, why engagement is high or low. And in the future, you can screen already for those factors that drive engagement, and you can proactively manage it, which gives you much more power to do something before you even have a problem, right? So that's what I really like. And I think advanced analytics allows us to make better use of the data available in an organization already.
Totally agree. And I think, this proactivity piece is so important. How can we get ahead of things instead of waiting until it's too late? And I know just, a couple of examples in terms of just getting that feedback and working on that data. I love this concept of just pulse checks. We used to wait for a year to get feedback from people on how they're feeling, on how they're thinking about everything from career to engagement to multiple different facets of their work life. And I think now what we're trying to do is get those pulse checks a lot more ad hoc and as needed, and using technology to do that, which has been really helpful. So I think that's something that's useful. And then the other thing I've noticed as well, and I'm curious if you have too, I think, leaders and managers, we need to start pivoting away from worrying about, whether employees are working enough and the hours they're working, but instead really help prioritize what's most important and focus on the output. And I think, again, in a hybrid world, that becomes really important. It's less about the time that people are spending in the day, but it's more about making sure, first of all, that people have clear goals, that they know what their intended outcomes are, and then that they have the time and space to do that in a way that works for them. So I think that's something that I've noticed an awful lot more in the last few years has become more important. And speaking of, workplace tools and analytics and technology, when we think a little bit about artificial intelligence and the AI-powered workplace tools that we have today, I think they're becoming commonplace across every sector. I'm curious, how do you see that trend impacting the employee experience and also helping employers to win on talent?
Yeah. So I think there is a lot of talk about AI at the moment. It also scares a lot of people, especially because many of us, first of all, think about, okay, what does AI mean for my own job? Am I going to be replaceable, right? But I think if we really look into the opportunity that it's creating, especially in factors, as you mentioned, that are also driving employee engagement, I think it's huge. I mentioned in the beginning of our conversation that one of the most critical factors for engagement and retention of talent is to provide development opportunities and career progression and learning for people. And that is actually an amazing space to use AI for, because AI-based tools, for example, allow to really draw conclusions about the potential of people, and what are the types of skills they may have based on their career history, based on the job they're doing today. What are possible smart recommendations, what I could do next? What are the job opportunities I could push myself into? What is the learning that I need to complete in order to get there? So I think there's a lot of opportunity space in learning, when choosing AI, and that will ultimately result in higher engagement, in more productive employees, in more successful careers, and also in better retention of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this topic is so big at the moment. I was reading some research. We have a work trend index on the topic, and it was saying that, interestingly, while 49% of people say that they're worried about AI replacing their jobs, because of course that's a big concern, 70% of people said that they'd actually delegate as much work as possible to AI in order to lessen their workloads. So I think this concept of how can AI help us to be more productive and actually take away some of those repeatable, maybe more administrative tasks, to give us a bit more time for the creative aspects of our job and for the analytical side. I think that's interesting. And I definitely think that's an opportunity for us as we look to the future and as the whole thing evolves. And so, when you think a little bit about another focus of the workforce right now and employee engagement, we've got so many different generations working together. We've got 5 different generations in the workforce right now. And I guess from a HR perspective and a HR leadership perspective, how do you think HR leaders need to approach their jobs differently when we take into account that breadth of diversity of generations?
Yeah, I think it's another one of those topics that scare a lot of employers. Because if you look at the data, by 2025, we expect 25% of the workforce to be Gen Z. And there is always this notion that the new generations want very different things. It's going to be really hard to adapt and to integrate them. But we actually recently published a big piece of work around generational differences with regard to demands from an employer, with regard to talent attraction and attrition. And what we found is that there's not much difference between the generation when it comes to what they want from an employer, what is driving their engagement. The top 3 factors, which I didn't mention before, are completely aligned across generation. It's about fair pay, it's about development opportunities, it's about a caring and inspirational leadership style. And all generations agree. We do see slight differences, indeed, but those are more, let's say, in some of the obvious factors, like the younger generations being a little bit more risk-taking, so they may have a higher likelihood of attrition. They may also have even higher demands when it comes to flexibility or hybrid working. But other than that, they're pretty much in alignment with other generations. So what I actually would recommend to HR leaders is rather to really try to personalize the work experience as much as possible. Paying attention to the feedbacks that they're getting. Really listening to employees as much as possible. And making also sure they consider the personal life circumstances that people are in. For example, are they in caretaking positions? Do they have young kids, etc.? Because those are factors that may ultimately really change the demands that people have much more than the generation as such.
Yeah, that's so true. I think this concept of that breadth of diversity, and it can be age diversity, but also style, culture, beliefs, background. There is so many variations right now. I know one thing that we've done that I found quite useful is this concept of a team agreement, which really helps to bring together everybody in the team, helps everybody understand a little bit more what's important to each other, particularly, and that also links to the generations, like what might be important to one person when they want to get back to emails. Is it okay out of hours? Is it not? When do we want to make sure we don't have meetings? How do we want to act when people are on holidays? Are they contactable? Not, all of these kind of really basic things that sometimes we take for granted. And I just think it's so important to have a conversation about those things so that everyone can be on the same page. And I think I've seen HR really being able to facilitate that. And it's been really useful to get something at scale that people can do with their teams. And I think that also links a little bit into the whole concept of learning, right? And I know, again, we've got such a big focus on learning across all of our organizations, particularly as the whole skilling is required to keep up to speed with technology, with everything that's coming out. So I'm curious, again, from your side, how are you thinking about learning, and how are you seeing it being used to really support the constant change of work patterns today?
Yeah. So first of all, most companies acknowledged that they have a massive skill gap, which is increasing. And unfortunately, almost 90% of companies, that's what we saw in our surveys, almost 90% of companies do not feel sufficiently prepared to close it. Yeah. The skill gap is typically biggest in the tech domains, right? So when it comes to skills like cybersecurity, product development, AI, of course, we've talked about it, automation, but also customer experience and so forth. And a lot of companies are not very bold when it comes to investing in more learning or trusting employees, transitioning from, let's say, non-tech jobs to tech jobs. Yeah. But if you actually look at the data of the workforce out there, we see that 44% of people in tech jobs today started in non-tech occupations, and people are totally capable of learning and of making bold moves in their careers. So I would really recommend to companies to be much bolder, when it comes to learning and closing skill gaps. And one good example to keep in mind that makes it very obvious is that the average role transition an employee makes, even if it's a promotion or a real job change, it's already a 30% skill change. And the most productive role changes even imply skill changes of 40 or 50%. Yeah. And it even makes people more productive and more successful in their jobs. Yeah. So looking at it that way, I think it's about really questioning, are we investing enough in the learning opportunities we provide? Are we using the right technologies to help people push their boundaries, right? To help people trust themselves to learn more and make the next role move. And when doing that at scale, we're much better prepared to close the skill gap we're facing.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, again, depending on the size of a company, in some companies, people can move quite frequently. Every couple of years, they might move job. And so that on-the-job training becomes the learning muscle. And in others, people might stay longer. And I think for companies to make sure that they've got learning built into their rhythm of the business, so to speak. Like, I know we do learning days every quarter where people are actually told, this is your time. Take your time to pick something that you want to focus on learning, whether that's technical or non-technical, whether it's online or whether it's maybe shadowing somebody that you might want to learn from. But I think everybody having that almost as part of their reviews as well. When people do performance reviews every quarter or every year, or every half, whatever the rhythm is, to make sure that it's a section and to make sure that people are focused on it. I think it's so important. And then, of course, for our customers, when we think about adopting technology, and I'm sure you've seen this so much, Angelica, there has to be a intentional focus on how people are going to adopt that technology. Because so often, I think we see technology being provided, but then people aren't using it. And I see that even ourselves, we need to make sure that we've got champions in place and that people have got some intentionality about how to learn on those areas. So I think that's really good. And I'm loving seeing the focus on skilling actually in organizations as we get into this period. So look, some really great insights shared there. Thank you so much, Angelica, and some great research that hopefully we'll be able to provide some links to as well for people who are interested. But maybe just to round up, anything that you'd like to conclude on, what would be your top one or two pieces of advice for people out there listening to how they can improve on employee engagement?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the conversation. I really enjoyed it. My big pieces of advice, I think I've touched on them during the conversation. First of all, it's really about optimizing the employee experience. And it may mean something different for different types of employees. Yeah, but there's a lot of ways, a lot of technology that helps to listen. Yeah, and to improve it. And the second message, obviously, we've talked about hybrid working, but still people get motivated a lot by the personal interaction, no matter what tools are used to create it, but really pay attention to the leadership style, right? Make it personal, invest in the coaching and in providing opportunities for people. And that will really get you a long way when it comes to talent development.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, super. Thanks for joining today, and look forward to catching up with you again on maybe a different topic related to our employee experience.
Thank you very much.